The Battle of Hanover. Yes, folks, little old Hanover, Pennsylvania. If you think nothing exciting ever happens here, well, on June 30th, 1863, something exciting did happen here in Hanover. There was a real live Civil War battle. So let's tell that story. What do you know about Hanover? Maybe you're familiar with the old movie theater that hasn't shown a movie in a long time. Maybe you're familiar with some of these locations or street names. And of course, our school, Mount Olivet Cemetery, some of the street names that are named for the Battle of Hanover: Meade Avenue, Stewart Avenue, Grant Drive. You might have heard of some of those places before. Well, they are well known places here in Hanover, and they all have something to do with the Battle of Hanover. This is York County. All this area is York County. It's all divided up into the different school districts, including Southwestern School District down here in the southwestern corner of York County. And I know some of you will say, oh, that's why we're called Southwestern. We're the southwestern corner of York County. You can see our school district surrounds the borough of Hanover on three sides. And the story about the Battle of Hanover pretty much takes place in the borough and also a little bit north in part of what is Southwestern School District. Also, our school buildings are right down here about where the letters H and A are. So some of the action takes place there as well. So what's going on? Well, it is the summer of 1863. General Robert E. Lee, the leading general of the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia, really wants to get this Civil War over with. The war has been going on for 2 years. Mostly the war in the East has taken place in Virginia between Washington, D.C. and Richmond, Virginia. So General Lee wants to get this war over with. He knows the South will not have the men and the materials or the money to keep this war going on a whole lot longer. So he's got to get it wrapped up. So he is going to bring his 75,000 man Army of Northern Virginia up into central Pennsylvania, hoping to find some good ground, make the Union Army come to him so he can beat it piece by piece by piece as it arrives. Well, as that is happening, cavalry, those soldiers on horseback, are supposed to be protecting the infantry, the slow marching people who march and fight on foot. So cavalry is going to come into Hanover, Pennsylvania, and the Battle of Hanover is a cavalry battle between Union cavalry, horseback soldiers, and Confederate cavalry. So there are rumors that there is Confederate cavalry here in Hanover. Gettysburg is just off the picture out here, and the Battle of Gettysburg will start the next day on July 1st. But Union cavalry is going to come into Hanover to check out rumors that Confederate cavalry is there. They're going to find those rumors aren't true, so they're going to start to leave. As they do, Confederate cavalry arrives and attacks them from the rear. So this Union cavalry will turn around, face the Confederate cavalry, and that's what the Battle of Hanover is. Cavalry soldiers who sometimes fight on horseback, and some of them fight dismounted. But that's the story of the Battle of Hanover. There are a lot of places that you might be familiar with where some of the action takes place. Right here is the borough of Hanover. And of course, you know where the square is. A lot of the action takes place right in the square of Hanover. Some of it takes place where our school buildings are, Southwestern High School and Emory Markle Intermediate School. You know, our buildings are on some high ground looking down in towards Hanover. And so it's a good place for the Confederates who will control this area to put some cannons to fire down into the town. Abbottstown Road going up towards Abbottstown and eventually on to Dillsburg is a place where some of that action happens. Carlisle Street is where some of the action happens. The Confederates put cannons in Mount Olivet Cemetery and fire down into on Union soldiers in Hanover. It's actually a section of the cemetery that's dedicated to soldiers killed in the Battle of Hanover. The Baltimore Pike, I know you've heard of. Same with Westminster Road. Even out here on York Street, about where the York Street Treat is where some of the battle action took place. The general who's in charge of the Confederate, the Southern Cavalry, is Jeb Stuart. He's a very young, dashing cavalryman who's actually going to lose this Battle of Hanover for the Confederates, and that's really going to wind up affecting how the Battle of Gettysburg turns out. Union commander, overall commander, is General George Meade. Maybe you've heard of Lake Mead, not far from Hanover. Well, George Meade is not in Hanover. He's down in Maryland at Taneytown when all this happens. But he is the overall commander of the Union Army. The Union cavalry commander in town here is General Judson Kilpatrick. Now, I mentioned those three names, Stuart, Meade, and Kilpatrick, because there are names of streets in town named for each one of them. Okay, so we have Stuart Avenue, Kilpatrick Avenue, a couple blocks away, Meade Avenue, and all of those are in the neighborhood of the Park Hills Elementary School. So raise your hand if you went to Park Hills Elementary School. Oh, okay, good, very good. Thought probably a bunch of you had. Well, those three streets are part of Southwestern School District, and maybe pieces of them in Hanover School District as well. All near Park Hills. They're all named for the Battle of Hanover. The short version of the story is our school buildings are here in the yellow circle. Union soldiers in blue control the town. Confederates going to spread out south of town. Fight, 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 fight throughout the day of June 30th, 1863. And eventually, the Confederates are driven off. They're going to have to get out of town, head up way up north towards Carlisle. Now, there's one of the blue and yellow historic Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission signs as you come into Hanover, just by, well, over my right shoulder where I'm taking this picture is Finch's, the tractor dealer. So if you're familiar with that in Hanover, I'm standing pretty much at the corner of the Finch property looking in towards town. There's Frederick Street as it looked in the 1800s. So you can see it's not a paved road, just a dirt road. The Confederates enter town this way to attack Union soldiers who are headed out of town off into the distance. Some of the fighting takes place about a place called the Weinbrenner House on Frederick Street. There are some Weinbrenner students in our school district who've been through 8th grade with Mr. Clark. Part of the story about the Weinbrenner House is the Confederates had cannons up in the Mount Olivet Cemetery shooting down into town. One of those cannonballs went through the door of the house, the Weinbrenner house. It was one of the types of cannonballs that was supposed to explode when it hit something. Well, the family was hiding out in the back end of the house here for protection because a lot of fighting is going on out in the street out in front. As this cannonball crashes through the back, it goes through the door, lands in the room, and the family is sitting right there. It's supposed to explode. So the dad of the family quick picked it up in a blanket because it'd be really hot, threw it out in the yard, hoping to get it out there before it exploded. Well, good news is it was a dud and it never did explode. So their family was saved. The house there has been sold, of course, many times since the battle, but the door is still there. They're not using it on the house right now. The door with the cannonball hole in it is still in possession of the owners of the house. A lot of the fighting took place around the Weinbrenner Motor Services building on North Forney Street. Three Hogs Barbecue is right near there if you're familiar with that area. And there's some baseball and softball and little league fields and things back behind, growing a beautiful crop of clover right now. So the barbecue cook-off happens back there. Part of the story of the Confederates is as they're trying to escape, their commander, Jeb Stuart, does an amazing leap on his horse across a big wide stream, which would have looked different in the 1860s than it does now. Would have been probably wider and the bank steeper. Jeb Stuart was almost captured and almost got away. Now, the day that I was out taking pictures of these places, I happened to come across a kid who, believe it or not, was playing with a gun that has a Civil War period firing mechanism on it. And I was taking these pictures as part of a class I was taking, and we were to take pictures that tell a story. So we were out taking pictures, some of the EHMIS teachers and I, working on taking pictures of places where the Battle of Hanover happened. So we asked this kid if he could pose for us, and he was happy to do that. So there's this little guy with his little Velcro sneakers, and believe it or not, he eventually wound up as a Southwestern student. So we've had him in class later, many years later. In town, there are a couple of monuments to remember the Battle of Hanover. This statue is called the Picket. A picket would be kind of a frontline soldier who's protecting the larger group of soldiers behind him. So the picket is a statue that's in the square. as you can see with the Hanover Shoe Factory Outlet store right behind them, the Clark's Shoe Outlet. The rider and the horse are facing the direction the Confederates came from. So kind of symbolically, he's protecting Hanover from any future invasions. There's also a dog as part of the statue. The dog's name is Iron Mike. So the day I was there taking pictures, I was there to get a picture of the picket. We also have another one of your teachers who you may recognize from the back was with me and taking the class. So that's Mrs. Charles. There's a couple of more pictures of the picket statue placed here by the state of Pennsylvania to remember the battle. In the other corner of the square, there are some Civil War period cannons with the story of the Battle of Gettysburg on it and the Gettysburg campaign. So some of the story of the Battle of Hanover is there as well. So if you've been in the square of Hanover and you've seen these cannons, that's what they're there for. This cannon was made in 1861, so it's possible that this one was used in the Civil War. As we're looking down the barrel of the cannon. This is what the square looked like at the time of the battle. Dirt roads, probably a little sloppy, a little messy. The Union forces kept the possession of the town of Hanover after the Confederates left. So some of the Union officers used this building. Then it was called the Central Hotel as a headquarters. Today, that same building is where the Party People is located, right in the square. So you may be familiar with that location. General George Custer, who later became very famous, was at the Battle of Hanover. And that's why on the sidewalk near the bank in the square, there's a 1 star because General Custer was a brigadier general that wears 1 star on their collar. And there were horseshoes, where he had tied his horse to a tree. Now, the horse did not really have feet pointing in all 4 directions. It's just symbolic of General Custer being in Hanover. So why do we still care about the Battle of Hanover? 150 some years later. Well, we care because we believe the way the Battle of Hanover turned out saved the United States. It also determined how the Battle of Gettysburg turned out. Confederates lost. They couldn't go straight to Gettysburg to join the rest of the Confederate Army. That Confederate forces under General Stuart had to go way up to Carlisle and then come back down to Gettysburg. And they pretty much missed most of the Battle of Gettysburg. That's a really important thing for the large number of soldiers whose job it is to provide information to the commanders. Missed the Battle of Gettysburg, missed a lot of it. And they weren't there to provide the Confederates and General Lee with the information they needed. So the Battle of Hanover is a very important thing in the outcome of the Battle of Gettysburg, which of course goes a long way to determine the outcome of the Civil War. The Battle of Gettysburg takes place July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, the 3 days immediately after the Battle of Hanover, which becomes a turning point in our war.